All right, here we are. Now we're good and live, I think. So, we are going to do a look at the DJI FPV drone kit, what we've already experienced with it, with flying it yesterday. We flew three batteries. I flew three batteries with it. Um, it's still just a bit mind-boggling to still to wake up and understand that this is where we're at today, right? It's just really cool, and I just want to reiterate that I think that the simple advancement of what we've seen in the last not even 2 years with the digital FPV system, but more so really if you really look back all the way to about 4 or 5 years ago when DJI first started playing with digital, with the original OcuSync digital FPV stuff, which a lot of people don't even recognize as like the first DJI FPV system. It was definitely not a huge breakthrough. It was a use case and a test case that they learned a lot from. I mean, what people don't realize is they applied that in some really big situations, and from that they derived the V2 FPV system, which would be the standard, the goggle V1, the Vistas, the Air. To me, like the next step in trying to bridge it. So there's lots of discussion out there about compatibilities, backward compatibilities, V1s, Vistas, Air units, and I'll be honest, there's not a lot of real answers yet. Um, you know, I I think I know the answers to a lot of these things as far as why we're not getting backwards compatibility yet with the goggles that came with the drone versus V2 goggles that we see are running different firmware. And I can say I see that because we do a lot of builds and we've seen a lot of goggles and a lot of radios and a lot of setup. And what's happening, just to clarify, is the drone and these goggles, when they come together, the goggles are running a clearly different new version of the current 1.6 software, right? And what that means is the V2 goggles that come with the drone right now, I believe, are the only goggles you'll be able to pair to the drone for now. The other thing about that is there is some vagueness about switching from drone FPV mode to air unit and Vista mode on these goggles that come with the drone because it's in the manual. However, we can't bind these goggles yet to something with a Vista or an air unit. I've actually tried a couple of times. We've looked up some software updates just to verify. I checked this morning again. Still nothing with the air unit getting a update to that kind of 1.6014 or whatever it is that's running on these goggles. So what does that mean? That it doesn't mean that it's never coming. It doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. And in fact, if you really look at the totality of how everything launched, this was pushed up and back and forward and all kinds of stuff. We know that DJI was not 100% on when and how they were going to launch this. And they seem to have gotten kind of pushed into a corner on it. And so what I believe is happening is the firmware, again, on these goggles to work with the drone have to be a certain firmware that's not available yet to anybody else, even with V2s. But it surely is coming to be able to make the single purchased V2s up to date to be able to fly with the drone. And we know that because they're going to sell the drone by itself. It's going to be $739 for the drone, $180 for the radio, and then obviously $569 for a goggle. So you could a la carte this whole thing. And so let's not freak out and worry that today there's not the backwards compatibility. Yes, it's super annoying. And as a business that we have, drones that need to be paired to now goggles paired to these new drones because we have clients buying both types of drones, we're in a bit of a pickle, right? I'm in a place where I have to kind of hold off and wait on shipping some things until we get these updates. And DJI, I do think, is missing out on a huge aspect of which is, this is not going to be for the hardcore freestyle build your own drone pilot. They're not going to enjoy it. They're not going to really appreciate what it can do. It's just not their style. It's not their thing, and that's fine. But the people that do want to learn FPV, that we get this contact all the time. How do I get started? How much for a kid? I've got $1,000 and I want to start flying FPV. Well, $1,000 doesn't cut it. And if you look at this, honestly, like we just said, 730, 560, 180, just for these pieces, not even the chargers and stuff, just a la carte, the DJI system is well over $1,500 just in buying it in these 3 pieces, no batteries, or no extra batteries, no charger, no kit, no case, no nothing, no extra props. So, to me, this is a really interesting validation of entry point cost, whether it's digital or analog. If you're going to get good gear and the right gear, if you can get it in a full package, kind of like what we do, it's usually a better option because you're going to get a better value out of everything. It's all going to be tied together. It's all going to work together, right? And that's what this does. This, to me, the biggest mind-blowing thing is that a user that wants to try FPV, no matter what you want to consider what a true FPV experience is, if they want to try to go from no experience to being able to do it, this right here is the package. Because if the goggles, which we assume again are going to be compatible with air units and Vistas, we know they will because the other V2s are, they just don't have the same firmware yet. If the radio, this is controversial, but I was of the opinion that I didn't think this radio would be usable on air units and Vistas. I backtracked my opinion on that. No facts yet, but we've been doing some digging. I've been doing some research with some vendors. I believe if you read the description for this, and you can go look at it, I think on Get FPV and definitely on Drone Nerds, it never says anything about only being compatible with the drone. And being sold a la carte, and the wording that they use in describing the design aspects and why it exists, kind of, it speaks to people not liking, or speaks to the other radio, right? It actually literally mentions the other radio. So if the description mentions the other radio and the other radio is not compatible with the drone, but is compatible with air units, and this is 5.8 and 2.4, which we know from the spec, there's no reason that, again, once air units and Vistas get their update, that this isn't going to bind. Now, the one caveat to that is I was under the impression that the center spring was not changeable. Again, working off of all the same assumptions everybody else was in the beginning here. It is. It's super easy, apparently. And in fact, one of the things we'll talk about later is one of the cool things about this drone are it actually knows that the center spring is sprung when you're in manual mode. And it tells you to adjust the F1 adjuster screw, which is right here. I just opened up the back. It literally will tell you in the screen, adjust the F1 screw. So, I mean, it's pretty cool that, that's possible. Also, another quick note that people may want to know, is it mode 3 capable? It is. I know I have a couple of clients that like to fly mode 3. Mode 3 capable is a option. You just go in and you literally just tell it mode 3. I'm not sure if there's any other things you have to do, but yeah. So again, just speaking to what I think is the biggest concern so far for people wanting to try the drone, people that have been waiting to get V2s because they want to try the drone and the radio, and give it a couple of days. Let's give it I don't know. If you have the ear of DJI, hint, hint, all you guys out there, guys and gals that are, influencers for them and have these units and have had them and obviously probably have a talking room or some sort of, ear, I would tell them they need to get those updates out. Like today, tomorrow, man, by Friday, if they don't have the air unit and Vista updates and the radio, they're going to be missing, and not that they care, but they're going to be missing a very critical moment in the transition period of people kind of accepting this within, the actual space. And again, dude, this radio, if this works with DJI air units and Vistas, I will be using this radio for everything. $180, you just can't beat it. The other radio was $279. It's bigger and all that. So, if we can get these things all bundled in a case, this is a pretty interesting tight setup. And then you also add these two pieces and you say, hey, I want to go fly, not this, but I want to go fly like my toothpick or, you know, something small, like a micro, like a whoop or something, there you go. You have everything you need to go digital whooping, and you could literally, you know, package this in a case that is super small. You know, I mean, we're actually going to be doing that. In fact, this is what I could see, just a goggle in a radio case if you just wanted that, right? So, yeah, just really give it a couple of days. Let's, you know, not freak out yet. I just can't see how, if you really look at all of it, you think that, you know, backwards compatibility and all of this is not going to be an ecosystem. So I just wanted to talk about that. All right. So I've got some talking points that I'm going to go ahead and go through. I'm going to try to run through them. But the center stick we talked about, right? The mode 3 we talked about, the radio connectivity, flight modes. So the flight modes on this thing are really interesting. I will say that my flight experience with this thing out the gate, as somebody that knows how to fly and had some expectations, and I've flown almost every DJI product out there that they've ever made, some other products too, with the consumer products and such, and some commercial products. I thought I knew what this was going to be, especially after hovering this thing in the shop, you know, the way we did. I mean, it just position held. It felt like a little Spark or a Mavic, just with that, you know, immersive experience for the goggles, which just that inside, just seeing that and just understanding the low latency and all of that was pretty dang sweet. But then we took it outside, right? And it's different. I mean, it's not. So as someone, again, that's flown a lot of these little mini DJI drones, and I've when I fly anything, I fly it like I own it, and like I stole it. Like I beat these things up. You see how I test fly all of our builds. I don't go light on anything because I want to push things to their limits and understand what my and their limits together are, right? And so it was a little unnerving flying for the first time in a long time in that traditional N and S mode. It wasn't, for me, very much fun. It wasn't very fast. Now, that being said, you can go dial up the speed a little bit. You can go dial up your rates. You can do a lot to make this probably a lot more fun to fly in those stabilized S modes, N modes. In manual mode, the first time we tried to unlock it into manual mode, I thought I had followed all of Bardwell's directions, which, again, DJI, you guys have got, maybe I missed the video, maybe there's a training video, but I don't feel like there's enough training video within the app that you could do. I think, first of all, like a quick little tap of how to go into modes or how to unlock stuff. Unlocking manual mode is a bit hairy. Still really trying to figure out the best way to set the radio up. Bardwell, who was the only person I had watched anything on before, had mentioned not wanting to loosen the radio stick. I'm torn, and I'm not going to give my advice on it until we go do a test later today. I'm going to loosen the stick, and I want to understand if the stick is loose and I take off in normal mode, like how does that affect? Because the problem is this. I so far have only been able to figure out how to put it in manual mode once flying. So you take off, so you arm the aircraft in normal, you take off, you let it hover, and then you flip it into manual mode, and then you have to leave this stick centered and you have to bring this stick down into a certain point. Now, that's fine, but if you're not, like, for me, I understand that as soon, like, I'm like, okay, it's going to go to manual. It's going to go to manual, and I know what to expect. But if you don't know what to expect, you're dropping the throttle, and basically the whole thing just kind of starts nosing down and go. Like, it's a little unnerving. So I don't like the idea. I think part of what I'm feeling in that and in flying in manual mode with the center spring, I think it is fighting itself. And as much as I think Bardwell was trying to help people in saying, hey, leave the center stick sprung, the thing's telling me to loosen it. So we're going to loosen it. We're going to go fly it again because I do want to make sure that the little bit of feel that I felt like the drone at times was kind of out of sync with what I was wanting it to do, maybe, or like I feel like it was fighting that center spring. And I think because it knows it's sprung, that it throws itself off. Like, I don't think it's good I think the radio needs you to loosen that up in manual mode. So we'll check that out. But other than that, Once it's in manual mode and you figure out how to fly it in manual mode and it's unlocked completely, so you've put it in M mode, which you have to go in like Bardwell shows you and make M mode M mode. You also need to go in and go unlock the attitude angle limiter on the gains and expos page. Once you do those two things and you get it unlocked and you start flying it, it flies just like, I mean, like an FPV drone. Everything pretty much. I mean, I feel like, again, for a few seconds, it took me a minute just to kind of get the feel of it. But dude, this thing, it flies like a heavier FPV quad. And I've flown a lot of heavy, I fly a lot of heavy quads, but my main purpose quad for a long time weighed almost a kilogram. It was like 950 grams with the GoPro on it. And I love that thing. So I can say that this thing flies very heavy. It also, you know, it's a bit too heavy, I think, on certain maneuvers and certain things, especially towards the bottom of the battery. Lots of talk about what type of battery. You know, I'm not a battery expert. This does say lithium ion polymer. So I don't know the difference between lithium polymer, lithium ion polymer. I believe lithium ion polymer is a true Li-ion, but I don't know if it's a mix. I don't know. Obviously, we know Li-ions don't have as high of a discharge rate, so you know you're going to see that sag, I think, towards the end. And I will say, man, there was a few hairy moments where I was flying, especially really low to the ground at one point, and I felt like I had to give it a lot more power than I should have because I almost felt like it was falling a little. But again, that was probably me working against kind of what I know and how I fly already. Overall, dude, it's great. It flew like an acro quad. Is it going to be the most beautiful, graceful thing flying in those ways? And is it going to produce, like, when flying at the at high performance and at those edges and pushing this thing, is it going to give you the best results on the video output? That I don't think is the goal. That's again where I think people are mixing messages and ideas of what they want this to be or thought it was going to be. At moderate pace, moderate to medium, even you know, a little bit above moderate pace, this thing produces pretty dang stable, constant, just good video. The props in view only come into play when you have it angled too low. Probably about 20 degrees or higher, you get the props completely out of view, as long as you don't stop. Obviously, if you stop with the prop, you know, it's going to lower that gimbal a little bit and get them in view. But the people complaining about props in view, that's 100% about the people flying it for the first time, not knowing what angle to put their camera at to really optimize the flight path. And really, I think that the best angle is almost 35 degrees, which is a lot higher than I normally fly my typical drones. Just because I typically, even if I rip, I mean, I still usually have it at about a 20 to 25 degree tilt. So when I first flew it, the first video we published, it has props in view. That was because we were literally running 15 degrees of tilt. So once we bumped that up on our next flight, and you'll see those coming out soon, we bumped it to about 35 degrees. And yeah, no props in view, everything shot clean. But again, we were really booking it at that point, and we were really pushing everything. So the results I haven't really looked at yet. I'll be very interested to see. In the camera, I do feel like there were some vibes and some things, especially throwing this thing around turns and stuff like that. But that's the gist of kind of the flight modes and me flying them. It was really pretty interesting, like I said. Now, the N and S mode, I will say you need to be pretty like careful with in getting yourself into higher wind situations, even really higher altitude situations. I will say, even as an experienced pilot, I was a little unnerved at how hard it was to bring this thing down from a higher altitude in non-manual mode. And I'll explain how that even happened real quick. This might worry people, but I actually think this is pretty impressive and pretty cool. It's going to be kind of controversial. I was in manual mode. I was flying in an area where we have a nearby non-tower airfield. So I was getting warnings telling me, hey, be careful. There may be, you're in an area that you should be careful. And then we do have aircraft that fly around the area at times. And I did get those warnings when they were in the air. And that was pretty cool. Now, something that happened that I don't know how it triggered or what triggered it yet, because I got to go do some more testing outside of where we tested so far. I was flying in manual mode and I punched out, I punched out to 700 foot almost. And I reached 713 feet, I think, on the display. And the whole thing stopped in its place and said no longer able or not able to enter manual mode. And it was just sitting in mode at 700 feet. Now, look, probably shouldn't have been at 700 feet. Again, honestly, I climbed that fast. I wasn't even paying it. I wasn't looking close enough. I actually didn't think I went to 700 feet, but we'll see. And yeah, it locked itself into manual mode. And the crazy thing is right when it did, I also got a warning of an aircraft in the area. And that aircraft was not at 700 feet. That aircraft was probably at 2,500 feet. I could hear it. Again, we know where these guys are flying all the time because I see them all the time. So I had to fly the thing in normal mode from 700 feet back down. And that was a bit interesting because this thing in normal mode, in mode, when you drop the throttle, it's not like it just comes down. It slowly comes down. So if I'm trying to avoid an aircraft because I'm in an area maybe an aircraft came into, I think I kind of need a little more responsiveness out of getting out of the air, right? Like, so it was a little unnerving. Basically, I dropped it down to about 400 feet or so, and I think right around, I don't even remember, but as I dropped it down, I kept flicking the switches, trying to get it into manual mode, and eventually I got it back into manual mode, and I dove it back down, and I came back. But again, experienced pretty much. I caught off guard. I figured it out. But man, I could understand how somebody that doesn't know what they're doing and to have that happen, that I don't know. So again, training manuals maybe, or I don't know. There's got to be something that kind of explains to people that manual mode could be shut down mid-flight. But again, what I said was this was actually pretty cool. It was nuts that happened. Like it's not a bad thing. I mean, except for the fact that I felt unnerved about coming down and how to get down quicker. The drone basically was no longer flying in an erratic form that I, whatever way I wanted it to. So it's going to sit there, and that I guess is safer. Sit there or slowly start to move, come down. Yeah, I guess that's safe. I mean, I don't know, just interesting. So again, maybe controversial, but I found that kind of interesting, and I'd like to test it further as far as what's actually going on there and what triggered it. I really want to know what triggered it. So we got all that stuff. I'm going to get to now the last couple of notes and the last couple of things. So we're going to talk about, we already talked about a little bit about what this is, but again, what this really is a gateway. This is a complete ecosystem, something that you buy that has everything you need to get going. And if again, everything works the way we think, you could take this out of the picture, buy yourself a $400 to $500 drone or so, and the batteries for that, and a charger, and now you have technically you could if these things when these things work with those air units, you have a custom FPV drone. So you could go from flying this first to then getting into those custom DIY customized solutions for whatever it is, whether it's a hobby purpose or a professional purpose. So those are just two of the ways that I think that this thing is really, incredibly, well positioned to help the industry. So there's that. So what gripes, right? There's everybody's got gripes about stuff. So I've got a few. When you first take off with this thing, again, even being pretty experienced and flying a lot of the other DJI stuff, I do feel like it pops up kind of fast and just in a peppy way. It's just a little weird. While flying it, I told you about the correction or the weird experience with the airplane and or the aircraft and stuff like that. I will say the other thing is when flying it in those stabilized modes, especially when we were flying outdoors, I did notice some erratic movement at times that, again, just not knowing what it is and just not being used to having a computer flying something for me, it was a little unnerving. I'm still trying to understand what was causing some of the fluctuations in the flight here or there, where it would just kind of jerk a little bit. But again, trying to fly this thing in as an FPV pilot the way we fly and flying it in the modes that it has, we're pushing its limits and we're working against the computer. So I'm sure a lot of that was just my own mental block, so to speak, of what's going on. So from a mental standpoint of flying it, it is a bit awkward for somebody with all the skill sets. So again, if you have FPV experience, think about that if you flew traditional drones before, think about how it took you, how hard it was and what you had to do to shift your mindset to fly traditional drones to FPV DIY stuff. And then you're probably going to have to kind of shift your mindset back a little bit in between, right? So all of those things we teach people and we tell people not to do anymore, and all those bad habits, you're kind of now needing those habits because it's got those abilities. So you're definitely going to change up the way you kind of think of things and fly things. I talked about the lack of power. It's not a gripe. It flies. I mean, I'm not like, hey, at its fastest speeds, it's not fast enough. It's peppy and it flies fast enough. I don't think it needs to fly any faster. My concern is again the batteries and what more performance could we get out of it? Maybe with a lighter battery. I mean, I feel like 60% of the weight of this thing is the battery. So if we could even cut 20% of the battery off, like, does that give it more performance? Is there going to be somebody that takes some lipo batteries and makes a 3D printed case, and we make a connector and we basically start plugging some higher C lipos into this thing? I could see us doing that. That would be interesting, right? So I think unlocking some more performance with some battery power is definitely possible. So that would be something. The true flight time. So the true flight time on this thing, when ripping and really giving it to it, it's like 6 minutes, 7 minutes maybe. I haven't flown a full battery, just straight ripping it, but the 20-minute flight time is definitely on N mode, S mode, and flying, just putting around, kind of flying it. You're going to be less than 10 minutes likely on FPV, full on, like, go manual flights. So that's that. The other controversial things, the altitude lock, like I talked about. I think that was actually really cool. The geofencing, yes, there's geofencing to a lot of degrees. So obviously people don't want geofencing, but if you have it, or if you want it, or if you don't care, it's there. People reviewing this thing with bias. I actually want to give a lot of people credit. I think a lot of people out there are like me in the sense of they didn't know what to really think or how to accept, or how to portray this without putting their own bias in it, because it's just again, we're all so hardcore into what we do, and we're all rooted in doing all this stuff together, and I think there's a lot of reasons why people are apprehensive, but I do think a lot of people gave this a pretty fair shake as far as how they were trying to be transparent, how they tried to just give their thoughts, and that's what we're trying to do. Not trying to make anybody make decisions. Again, everybody's going to find different tools and different solutions for them. $200 for refresh. So in case you don't know, when you log this thing in and you get it all activated, it's going to ask you if you want refresh. You have 48 hours to accept it. It's $200. We did it. We got it refresh on ours. The first time, if it ever breaks, we're going to send it in. We'll let you guys know what happens. That being said, we also hope to be doing some repairs ourselves for people that don't want to use refresh. So we'll have some options there. But $200 for 2 years is not a bad deal. We'll just have to really see what it's needed to replace it and how refresh works, how they charge you, and how many times I can get it fixed or whatnot. We're not going to go slamming it in the walls on purpose, but just want to make sure that we do test refresh at some point. So, all right, that's the good, the bad, the ugly. So the last bit of this, I just want to say the really cool stuff, right? The goggles' new UI, the user interface that interacts with the drone and the way that the menus look and everything, the new look of the goggle inside the goggle is amazing. I didn't know that I could feel better about the UI, but I do. I dig the new UI. It seems much more streamlined and easy to navigate. The ease of use of all of this, again, man, get it out the box, put it in, plug it in, get it all updated, and then power it all up, and it again just flies. I mean, I set it over there, we took off, and just let it hover, and it just sits there. So ease of use, obviously, dang cool. The radio is what I think is one of the cooler bits of stuff out of this. Is this radio again? If and when it works with everything, it's going to be a huge hit for the entire DJI FPV lineup. The landing, it's pretty cool that it just auto lands. I mean, you know, it's nice to be able to land your drone yourself, but the auto landing is also pretty darn cool. And then the entire package, just again, it's just all here. You get it. It's a straight cost. You can go use those things and decide from there where to go within the market and how you want to kind of expand your experiences. So for that, it's just super, super cool. And then, you know, look, I'll say this one last time. This is the future of where DJI, I believe, is going. I believe every drone they put out from now on will have a low latency option of some sort, whether it's an Inspire that you can add the FPV camera to, or that they just start building the air units into these things and getting the super low latency at all of their drones and all of their platforms. And adding that immersive experience is only going to grow the application of it. And that, again, is what's super exciting for us. So more creatives, more immersion, more people getting in there and using tools that can opportunity to produce their vision. That's what I can't continue to say it enough. This is really a great gateway into bridging all of the gaps that are currently still existing within, especially the professional markets, and getting creatives and people that are embedded within making decisions on content creation at a high level, how to use these applications. So that's that. We're gonna wrap this up. I appreciate whoever's watching and thank you for being here. We'll go through, check out some of the comments, and we'll try to keep a tab on the next one so we can kind of answer those. Look, if you want a DJI FPV kit, we have them. We have them coming in all week. We're shipping them all week. So there's 4 or 5 I think right now that are available for purchase that are not taken yet. And as soon as those sell out, we'll have more. We also, like I said, we will be carrying radios and goggles and all this stuff as soon as they're released. Right now, you're not going to find V2 goggles anywhere. They're back ordered until probably March when we start seeing them flood the market again. The DJI radio, we don't know yet. I'm suspecting possibly 2 weeks we could have these and the drones by themselves. The problem with that is people aren't going to be able to have V2 goggles unless they already have them. So again, your fight is going to be to find these for now. And then we also, just a quick heads up, air units are looking a little thin right now in the supply chain. So you want some air units, you might check those out. But that's about it. Let us know whatever you need. We're here to help. Fly safe, fly smart. Just fly. Peace.